Hail and welcome to Wisman's Wood. Now this is a very ancient oak woodland in the very heart of Dartmoor, and it's a place that's absolutely suffused with magic and with mystery, with myth and with legend. So what better place to come to celebrate Samhain? And we're in the ancient kingdom of Dumnonia. It's where the Celtic Dumnoni tribe once lived, loved, worked, farmed and fished. They also marked the turning of the seasons, and we are in the final turn of our journey around the Pagan Wheel of the year. I'm River Oak and I'm a Druid of these parts, and if you've been journeying with me, well, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, I'm going to show you a short film that summarises our journey so far. So I will see you on the other side. So, just to recap before we start, a lightning tour of the Wheel of the Year. This is a cycle of 8 celebrations, each around 6 weeks apart, and it melds together the 4 major solar events of the year, that's the solstices and the equinoxes, with 4 ancient agricultural celebrations, each of which mark a really key time in the old North European farming calendar. And we kick off in the 12 o'clock position at Yule. Yule is the winter solstice. It's the longest night and the shortest day of the year. By Imbolc, it's still kind of chilly, but we're seeing the first signs of spring, maybe the occasional snowdrop. In the 3 o'clock position, the spring equinox, when night and day are in equipoise. That is Ostara. It's also called Albanila in the Druid tradition. And now we're really beginning to get a feel for spring, aren't we? And there's wonderful things are happening, particularly hares laying eggs. If you want to find out more about that, you'll have to keep watching. Next up comes Beltane. Oh, blissful Beltane, a time of bonfires and bonking, when we're going to embrace each other and the F word, fertility. Well, whatever did you think I was going to say? And no, you can't just fast forward to Beltane. And after all that excitement, it's going to be time to lounge about and enjoy midsummer, the longest day, the shortest night, with lovely, balmy, sunny days beside the seaside. Ice cream, anyone? But before long, we'll have to get up and do some work because it will be Lunasa, the first harvest, the harvest of corn, barley and wheat. Next we've reached the autumn equinox, a time again of equipoise between day and night, when we start to enter the dark half of the year. This is Mabon, or if you're a Druid, you're going to know it as Alban Elfed. It's the second harvest, the time when we bring in the fruit and the nuts. Next up, it's Samhain, that magical time of the year when the veil between this life and the other world is very thin. So thin that we can communicate with the dead, and in fact they may well just come a-walking around. Spooky! And then we're back where we started. We are back at midwinter, the winter solstice. It's Yule again. So this is Samhain. Now Samhain is one of the 2 probably most precious festivals for pagans, the other being Beltane, because these are the 2 hinges of the year. The Celts only had 2 seasons. They had summer, which began on May the 1st, Beltane, and they had winter, which began on the eve of what we would now call October the 31st, which is Samhain. So it's a hinge time, it's a liminal time, and the lovely thing about being here at Wisman's Wood is this is a liminal place. We're on the very edge of the wood because we can't go in, it's such a delicate habitat, but it is very much a place between 2 different environments. We're between the woodland and the moorland, between the mundane world and between the other world. We'll be talking more about that in a little while. And Samhain is that liminal place between the 2 seasons, which is why it is so special. So what's in a name? Well, a few names to be accurate. Samhain is an Irish word which means summer's end. In Scotland it's Savin. But the Welsh and Cornish use words based on calends, which means the first day, in this case the first day of winter. So it's Calengath in Welsh, and Calengrath in Cornwall, where I was raised, and by the way, if you've never been there, you really should. And at these liminal times, such as Samhain, it is believed that the veil between this world and the other world is at its very thinnest. It's very porous. So what exactly is this other world? Well, In the Celtic worldview, or should I say other worldview, it's a realm that exists alongside the mundane world, which, by the way, is where we're hanging out now. It's often depicted as a paradise, the Summerlands, a place of peace, beauty and abundance, which actually is just like Cornwall. Another cheap plug. And this world is populated by deities, the Fae and the spirits of our ancestors. Now, at certain times of the year, they can just stroll across and meet us. And the veil was considered to be very, very thin, in fact thin, thin and thinnest, in sacred places such as stone circles, burial barrows and concealed caves. Now the Celts, together with most indigenous cultures, held a deep veneration for the ancestors. Indeed, a community was not felt to be complete without the ancestors walking alongside it, for they were the spirit representatives of the tribe who could cross between worlds, intercede with deity on behalf of the tribe, and also advise the living. They formed an unbroken chain of wisdom that led back and back and back into the deep dark mists of history. So times of easy contact were times to be celebrated, and that meant fun and games, feasting and giving. Offerings were made to the spirits of the dead and also to the spirits of the land. And a portion of food would be placed on the table for the ancestors. Candles would be lit in windows to guide them home, and meals were sometimes eaten in silence, both as a mark of respect and also to make their presence easier to feel, for these were called dumb suppers. In the UK, we are supremely squeamish when it comes to talking about death or the dead, even though it's the most natural thing in the world. But in other places, most notably Mexico, the Day of the Dead has been a time of open houses, music, dance, fiesta, all for at least 3,000 years. And mate, that is one heck of a party. Graves are adorned with marigolds, candles and food offerings are brought to the graveside, and families sit up with the dead through the night. In some parts of the country, all family clean the bones of the departed each year, a way of honouring and connecting with them, which is undertaken, forgive the pun, from a very young age. Think that's weird? Well, in parts of Indonesia, every few years, bodies are exhumed, cleaned and then dressed in new clothes. They are then reburied, but not before the family have posed for selfies with Gran and Grandad. Smile! Well, I guess this is a Marmite situation. You either love or hate the idea, but I think it's a kind of cool way to stay connected with your kin. And on a less radical scale, I always spend time with my parents at Samhain. I go to the grave, pour them a glass of sherry, drink a toast together, and I bear a gift to thank them for their care. And then I light candles that will burn through the night. Now this is the time of year when the constellation of Orion, the hunter, appears in the night sky, and we would be looking at it if I was brave enough to be here after dark, but I'm not, so late afternoon will have to do. This is also the season of hunting, and in the legends around Wistman's Wood, no legend is stronger than that of the wild hunt, the hunt for souls. Now it is believed that the name Wistman's Wood is derived from the word wished, which means eerie or haunted. And legend has it that a pack of spectral hounds with black fur and glowing red eyes emerge from the boulders here behind me and are led on a hunt by the huntsman known as Old Crocken being the guardian spirit of the moor. And they search the lands hereabout looking for lost souls. In other parts of Britain, the hunt is led by other characters. Sir Francis Drake, who lived in the next village to mine, tends to pop up a lot in West Devon, and throughout England it's Herne the Hunter. In Wales it's Gwynab Nuth, and in Scotland it's Cailleach, the ancient ancestral mother goddess, the goddess of winter. Each functions as a psychopomp who, accompanied by ancestral spirits, hounds and fairy folk, guide the spirits of the recent dead towards a noon, that's the Otherworld, where they have a period of rest, regeneration and renewal. I needed that. But there was a belief that not all spirits were out to be your best buddy. No, there were also malevolent forces afoot. so at Samhain most folks just stayed at home. Salt was sprinkled across thresholds, iron placed by doors, and protective herbs burned in the hearth. Well, we don't want things coming down the chimney, do we? Carved turnip lanterns with hideous faces were placed by the front door to ward off the bad guys, and if anyone dared to go out and about, well, they would wear sprigs of protective rowan, and they would disguise themselves as evil spirits, both to blend in with the unheavenly host and to scare away any ghouls that got that little bit too close for comfort. And another reason for not venturing outdoors alone was the fear of being lured into a fairy dance, a wild, erotic frenzy that would appear to last for a single night. But when the exhausted dancer finally staggered home, he would find that generations had passed. Oh, and the price of potatoes had just shot up. So does all this talk of ghostly happenings sound a bit familiar? Well, I guess now's as good a time as any to explain how these ancient traditions have carried across to the present day. Happy Halloween, folks! Now, a recurring theme we have explored in our journey around the Wheel of the Year is the way in which, when they couldn't suppress a pagan celebration, the Church promptly plonked a Christian version pop on top of it. Samhain is no exception, and in the year 741 CE, Pope Gregory III introduced the Feast of All Hallows on November the 1st. So the night before became All Hallows Eve, or, you've guessed it, Halloween. And with it came a real change of mood to scare folk away from their pagan pastimes. Feasting was replaced by fear. Celebration was replaced by chaos. Now there was a negative narrative that spoke of demons and the unquiet dead returning to earth to torment the living before being hounded back to hell. How rude. On All Hallows Day, poor folk would go from house to house offering prayers for the souls of the dead in return for coins or food, particularly soul cakes. And from this medieval tradition evolved the custom of guising, when prayers were replaced by poems, songs and jokes, and if no payment was received, well, then a prank would be played. Immigrants, arriving on small boats, took these practices to America, and this is where trick-or-treating was introduced in the last century. Here in the brave new world, pumpkins were carved into lanterns, far easier than turnips, and children dressed as ghosts and witches to continue the tradition of house-to-house begging. But by now it had all become very light-hearted and for sweeties rather than soul cakes. Now let's pause for a wee while to talk about witches. Why are they so often featured at Halloween and depicted zooming about the skies on broomsticks? Whoa! That was close. So the word witch is derived from the Anglo-Saxon witan, which means to see or to know, and belief in magic can be found way back in early civilizations. Indeed, in Egypt, priest-magicians were employed for divination, healing and spiritual purposes, and similar practices carried on through the centuries and throughout the world. From the Middle Ages, cunning folk became common throughout Europe, offering services such as healing, midwifery, finding lost items and fortune-telling. Charms and spells would be cast, usually, but not always, with good intent. Most communities had a local wise woman or man, and these were known as pallars in Cornwall. Cornwall, remember Cornwall? Lovely place to go, don't forget. However, as the influence of Christianity grew, pagan traditions were condemned. Those practicing this ancient craft were accused of cavorting with demons and blamed for every conceivable misfortune, including illness, death and crop failure. Accusations of witchcraft often arose from social tensions within a community and were frequently levelled against those who were considered to be outsiders. Well, how times don't change. The church saw the old ways as a threat and was particularly averse to powerful women who might even exert control over a man. Well, heaven forbid. And so practitioners of the ancient craft were first ostracised and then persecuted. witch hunters were appointed, manuals on witch recognition published, and the infamous witch trials began. In England and America, those found guilty, often using weak fabricated evidence, were hanged, whilst in Scotland they were burned at the stake. The stereotypical image of a black-robed, pointy-hatted, wart-encrusted, hook-nosed, cat-clutching hag riding a broomstick, which, by the way, may have had sexual connotations, was largely a product of later folklore, but it is this image that has inspired the costumes still worn by a gaggle of giggling girls when they go trick-or-treating today. So what about other traditions of this time of year? Well, I guess no Halloween party would be complete without a little bit of apple bobbing. So exactly what is that all about? Well, apple bobbing has its roots in the Roman and Celtic belief that apples symbolise fertility and sexuality. Young unmarried suitors would try to catch a floating apple, or sometimes one hanging on a string, in as few chomps as possible. If one go was enough, they would have a match made in heaven. 2 goes and the romance would start well, but then crash and burn. And if you needed 3 attempts, well, you may as well just give up, grab a pizza, then go home to watch a rom-com alone. Ah, shame.
All by myself, don't wanna be all by myself anymore.
A variant on this was that the first to catch their apple would be the next to marry, and everyone knew that if you placed a bobbed apple under your pillow, you would see a future spouse in your dreams. Apples were also peeled in one go, as it was believed that the peel would form the initial of a future true love. So that's all good fun, but at the very root of it is divination. That's connecting with the divine, with the higher power, call it what you will. So Samhain, when the veil between worlds was felt to be so thin, was an absolutely prime time for fortune telling, for finding the future, for gaining guidance. Scrying, which means seeing, involved peering into a medium, typically water or fire, and later a dark mirror or crystal, in an attempt to see visions that offered personal guidance. A bit like Granny reading your tea leaves. Tea leaves, remember those? And then there were shamans, or shamans, practitioners of the earliest known spirituality, who would enter a trance-like state and then journey to the otherworld to question ancestors, spirits and deities, so gleaning any vital knowledge that was needed by the tribe. Later on, and in arguably a less adventurous fashion, tarot was used to gain insight from the otherworld, readings being commonplace at this time of year. Storytelling was also a feature of Samhain, particularly for the Celts, who relayed their histories, teachings and moral codes from generation to generation, using only the spoken word, for none had earned their pen license, and so nothing was ever written down. Folk would sit in silence around a sizzling fire as an elder whispered stories of spirits and strange happenings to his or her awed audience. Typically, these included some sort of moral choice making and served to instruct as well as to entertain. Nowadays, we are more likely to find families in front of some huge widescreen surround sound TV, half watching a horror movie whilst doom scrolling Snapchat. Shh! I'm watching this. Now, fire also features brightly in the history and traditions of Samhain. And the fires, well, they served 2 purposes. One was to ward off evil spirits, those ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night. But the second function was sacrificial. This was the time when livestock was brought down from the high pastures to overwinter in the lowlands. Often they would be driven between 2 fires to cleanse them and to bless them, and any that looked too old or infirm to last through the cold months, well, they were slaughtered, their meat being smoked and salted to preserve it. Their bones were then ceremonially tossed into the fire. Ah, so it was a bone fire. Yes, that's where the word bonfire comes from, but remember, no one likes the smarty pants. Torches were then lit from this communal blaze and carried to each dwelling to reignite the hearth fire. And since 1606, bonfires were more likely to be seen on November the 5th, which was called Guy Fawkes Night, now Bonfire Night, when an effigy of one Guido Fawkes was ceremonially burned to commemorate his failed attempt to blow up Parliament and King James I with it. From 1650 on, fireworks became part of the celebrations, and this continues to the present day, although the grisly fate of Mr. F, for he was hanged, drawn and quartered, has been conveniently forgotten. Today, Bonfire Night is much more about woos, wows, and when are we going home, Dad? Well, my bonfire will certainly be lit this Samhain, but as a vegetarian, and luckily that cow's going to get away with it this time, as a vegetarian I will not be adding any bones to my sacrificial fire. But I will be throwing some seasonal and sacred herbs into the flames, things like mugwort and rosemary and sage, which make a really good offering at this time of year. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the legends, the history, the mystery, the mythology and the traditions of Samhain. But exactly what messages can we take home from this final festival in the Pagan Wheel of the year? Well, it's a time of paradigm shift. Light yields to darkness, busyness yields to rest, and life yields to death. Yup. All around us we see nature either turning inwards or dying. But hey, that's okay, it's just the natural way of things. It's the ageless cycle of life. And as life retreats into the earth and we retreat indoors to the hearth, we have the perfect opportunity to retreat into our deeper self. You see, the dark is not to be feared. After all, human life begins in the dark, nourishing silence of the womb. Now for the Celts, each new day began at sundown, and darkness was needed before the dawn, which is why for many pagans, and possibly for our ancestors, the long dark nights of Samhain mark the beginning of a new year, of new possibilities, of new potential. Well, like the trees behind me, now is the time to be stripped back to the bare core of who we are. It's time to leave behind those thoughts and behaviours that prevent us becoming the person we would like to be, that bright, shining soul. Well, on that very optimistic note, I guess it's time to say goodbye from this glorious ancient woodland here in the very heart of Dartmoor. I wish you all a very happy Halloween, a very spiritual Samhain. I hope that our paths cross again soon. But until then, my friends, I'll bid you all hail and farewell and blessed be.